Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for the support and for being there. We're going to continue with the second hour with Emily. I think we were talking about, no, I kind of lost the thread, but you were going to tell us a story about something connected to what we were talking about.
Okay, so there's been, obviously, like, there's lots of crazy things going on in the world right now, but one of the things that's like the hot topic in our reality has to do with censorship, like we were talking about, and that, should there be free speech or should there not be free speech? And that censorship, at least to our awareness, generally has come up around a couple of topics, right? And the first place that like I started becoming aware of censorship has been for many years now, and is around topics of a conspiratorial nature, like false flag events or sex trafficking or pedophilia or Satanism in Hollywood or that kind of stuff, right? It seemed that at a certain point, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, some of the videos that you used to be able to see on YouTube or some of the posts that you used to, they started to disappear, right? They started to get taken down, channels started to get removed, all of that kind of stuff. Sometimes around the weather engineering too, right? And then, in more recent times, like starting around 2014 or 15, there started to be the conversations and then the actions around censorship when they related to like racial issues, right? Racial issues or issues around gender or things like that. And of course, over the course of the last year, it's been really much more about health, right? The issues related to health and elections. But some of the best stories that I've ever heard of people having like tremendous personal growth, transition, change have been around issues related to racial hate, right? And so there's a couple of things that I'm thinking about. There's a gentleman named Daryl Davis, right? And he's an African-American gentleman, and he's known as a person who has basically, like, through his one friendship with one guy who was like high up in like the Ku Klux Klan or a white supremacist group, like he over many years transformed through their friendship, the person transformed from, a white supremacist to someone who is not, right? And over the years, Daryl Davis has also been instrumental in helping many other people learn and have the journey through those things, right? And then there was another gentleman who I can't think of his name right now, but he's been on a TED Talk. And he was part of a neo-Nazi white supremacist hate group, right? And he changed, right? He changed, and now he counsels other people and tries to help them to make those changes. But there's no way that those people would be able to, like, the ability to say horrendous things has to exist for people to go, like Daryl Davis had to know that there were these terrible people that thought these things and feel like it was an important thing to do to, like, try and get to know these people as a human being and see that our humanity transcends all of that stuff. If you're not allowed to say those things, and those are things that people just repress, then there's no opportunity for them to say them, for them to be told they're wrong, and then for them to go through a transformation or a change. And you know what? Some people are never going to change and are never going to think they're wrong. And I don't even know if I'm the person to say whether it's right or wrong to have a certain opinion. But like, you can't, I sometimes think obviously think that it's possible that there's lots of evil motivations behind wanting to control speech. But let's just pretend for a second that they really are just trying to protect everybody's feelings. You and I know that's not true, but let's pretend for a second. Like, that robs somebody. Trying to protect one person's feelings from getting hurt robs another person from having the chance to go from being an asshole to not being an asshole, right? And for these people who would have had their feelings hurt, and this would have been the person doing the feeling hurting, to be able to gain understanding and respect and share time together and music together and culture and whatever, that if you just say to this person, you can't say that, or you're going to jail, or you can't, whatever, like that's never going to happen. Right. And so like allowing 10 people's feelings to be hurt, or allowing 10 people to have jackass ideas that they never shift on, is well worth it if just one person from each camp makes the shift or the jump, right? To like, you know, I got over the fact that my feelings were hurt and I reached out to this person or whatever, and this person is like, you know, I sat down, whatever it is, like one person having a really important shift in the way that they see things and the way that they see the world is really important. It's more important than protecting everybody's feelings. Like if your feelings are protected, you can't change. Like all of the things that like have made me toughen up, grow up, get over myself, make changes that needed to be changed in myself, stemmed from somebody hurting my feelings, or somebody being hurt by something that I did to them, or that they perceived that I did to them, that caused me to go inside and go, shit, that was pretty fucked up actually, right? Like sometimes you do shit that you think is okay, that you think you can get away with, and somebody's like, yeah, no more, I'm not taking that from you. And you're like, what do you mean? Everybody else is always taking that bullshit from me, right? What do you mean you're not gonna take it, right? You know, and then then you have time to reflect. And often the change doesn't happen immediately. That's the thing. That's the problem with the nanny culture, or like the nanny state, or wanting to control everybody's language and behavior, is they think that by saying you can't do something or you have to do something, that means that person will just do it now, right? And no, what generally happens is they'll either never do it, or they'll pretend to do it on the outside, but they didn't really do it, so nothing ever changes. That period of time in between when you get called out and when you actually change, those are the most important moments of your entire life.
And this reminds me of times like the Inquisition and stuff like that. Which was it, Galileo? Like they forced him to retract his ideas, and then the story is that during the trial he said, okay, yeah, I retract them, but then under his breath he said, "Y por se mueve," but it still moves. You know, talking about how the planets moved around each other, etc., or around the sun.
I retract what I say, but they still move.
So, this idea of having people think a certain way without them reaching that conclusion in their own internal growth and evolution, you know, it's part of maturing as a human. We've reached a certain, not a plateau, but, you know, people think, okay, so university, that's the most mature a person can be, the most evolved, the most knowledgeable. And after that, that's it. There's nothing more to learn. It's very silly. And then you realize, okay, so this person, a doctor, you know, they've done so many years, over a decade of studies, and they know so much about this one subject. But then you interact with them, and emotionally, they're like a little kid. So, okay, maybe there is some room for evolution in that person. And maybe if that person was allowed to, or allowed himself or themselves to interact with people who he doesn't agree with, and learn from those interactions, or people who say things that maybe they shouldn't say. I mean, this is not an idea that we are proposing that people should be hurting each other or hurting each other's feelings, not at all, but not having that kind of resistance. How would you grow if or go to the gym and lift just one pound or whatever? How would your muscles grow if they weren't, I don't want to use fighting, but fighting against a particular resistance? So it invites people to go a little bit outside of their comfort zone and expand, and then to anchor back into themselves, and in interacting with those people that hurt you, on the one hand learn, okay, other people see the world differently, or you even learn more about your own position, and you say, no, definitely the way that I think, I am more I am more in agreement with my own belief because I adhere to this opposing view, and it sounds completely ridiculous. Because if you have a view and you've never questioned it, it's not as stabilized in yourself because you don't really know what an alternative could be. But when you hear somebody say an alternative and you hear and it sounds ridiculous, for example, or not just ridiculous, but maybe you listen to it and yeah, no, I don't see the way that you see. That helps you also become more established in your own truth and then continue your own path honestly.
Yeah. So two things. I'm still a little bit stuck on your Galileo thing, like, okay,
Go.
but it still moved. This is the part that's weird, right? So one of the things that sometimes would get either censored or poo-pooed, right? Like if you massively shame something publicly, it's almost the same as censoring it, because then it puts this stigma on it that most average people will be like, I'm not even gonna fuck with that because I don't want to be called crazy or whatever. So the flat earth movement falls into that, right? So here's the part that's crazy with that. Like, and you know, I'm kind of earth shape agnostic. Like there's some things that make sense to me. There's some things don't. Like, I guess, like I like the FPV angel model, which that is sort of a flat earth model, but the earth being flat isn't the point. It's just a feature, right? That makes more sense to me than like some of the ways that they try and push it. I don't know what I think though. Like,
Well, there could be that element of distraction, like you were saying in the other hour of, okay, let's focus on what the shape is and not focus on whatever the other.
What is right, yeah. Right. Okay. So to me, like, even if the, like, let's say the FPV angel model is correct, right? So they're saying the ground is actually flat, right? But the ground projects an energy field that is arced or circular. So that is in a sense the earth be, I think it's round and flat and some other stuff too. And what, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a flat earther, or I'm not a flat earther, right? I'm in that phase of, I don't know what's going on. But here's the part that is crazy about all this shit, right? So like just Galileo, he could retract, but it still moves, right? You can, like, if you just let the flat earth people say whatever they want, and you think if you're sure the earth is round, just the people saying it's flat doesn't make it flat. So why are you concerned that they say it? It's almost like they're afraid that if they let them say it enough times, the earth will become flat, right? Or something, right? And so like, even if we obviously, like, okay, the obvious answer would be like, oh, they don't want people to know, right? But they're saying, oh no, thinking that is stupid. Okay, well, let people think something stupid. It's not going to make if you think your earth is round, them saying it's flat will not make it flat, right? So the whole thing is very strange.
And at the same time, not allowing people to say things that you consider stupid would then mean that, okay, nobody is saying stupid things, so what I think must be the correct thing, because saying stupid thing isn't allowed. So what I say is true.
If something is untrue, no matter how many times you say it, doesn't make it true. So what is the problem, right? Like, it's like people, it's bizarre. It's like people who are sure they're right can't even believe their own truth. So that's weird, right? That's like a weird one. And then the other one, and this is like, I've mentioned little things about this before, but I haven't gone into depth with this, but I'll say a little bit more about it, right? So like, I don't know what threads of information that you paid attention to over the years, right? I've paid attention to all kinds of things. So I've looked into all sorts of shit, and I'll generally go wading into the pool a little bit before I decide, yeah, no, this is bullshit or this is not bullshit, right? But one of the things that I waded into a little bit, and I'm so glad that I did, even though I felt resistant in some ways to wading into it, was a lot of these racial issues, right? So around 2014, I don't know if you ever followed Red Ice Radio or whatever, right? But that was one of the best like conspiracy podcasts for a really long time. And he started making this turn into, you know, this idea that there was a war on white men, and that, you know, that there was, he you know, started with the kind of the alt-right stuff, like the Richard Spencer and different things, but he got into pretty deep levels, and I think he still resides. I think he and, you know, eventually the course of his information went from great conspiracy information to really a show about racial, I don't even know what to call it, right? Like, I don't know if I wouldn't say necessarily he's a white supremacist, but this idea that the races should be separate and blah, blah, blah. So when he first started doing this, I was like, what? Right? But I was like, okay, like I'm going to listen to this because maybe there's something to it. And then you start listening to it and people, so a couple of things. First of all, there's some things that are pointed out that are just things that are undeniably true. And the fact that we're not allowed to say them, right, then creates this other, then when creates like more extreme things that maybe aren't true. So a thing that was talked about all the time that is undeniably true, but you're not allowed to say, is that there are differences between the races. There just are, right? There are differences between, like, even though you and I both appear to be the same basic color, you're raised in Uruguay and I'm raised here, there's differences between us. Like, there's always differences between differences, right? So like, that's just anything. There's differences between hot and cold, there, right? So there is a difference between the, you know, races. They have different things that their, you know, genetics and code, they have different cultures that they're raised in. Without saying one is good or one is bad, they're different, right? And for some reason, like, we have been unallowed to say that. And so when somebody says something that's undeniably true and that feels good to hear, then you go back and you keep listening to the other things they're saying, and it all gets mixed together, and suddenly you're believing shit that isn't true, but it came from the same person that acknowledged something finally that's undeniably true. So you keep listening, right? Now, that wasn't the experience I had, but I saw that happening to other people beginning to believe everything some of these people were saying just because they had said one or two things that, like, you know what, this is true, right? So I listened for like probably a year or more into them going down this road. And it wasn't just this podcast. I began listening to other things. I would listen to, you know, talks or read articles by people from the alt-right who had this idea that, you know, that maybe the races should be separate, right? And what was really weird was people were so put off by the fact that I was even looking at it that made me want to look at it more. So it wasn't that I was agreeing with what they were saying. You know, I was often actually really put off by some of the things they were saying, but there became a satisfaction to me in being like, yeah, I'm going to look at it, dude. Like, I'm looking at it, right? And the way that it would agitate and irritate people. And that's another danger of saying you can't talk about something or you can't look at it, because then it makes people more, it wasn't making me more curious to look, but I was having fun, like making them uncomfortable with the fact that I was looking at it. Like, and at this point now I look back and I'm like, well, that was, you know, probably a lack of maturity, but that's an undeniable phenomenon that people go through, right? Where like you're told not to do something, and then that makes you A, want to do it, or B, you're doing it, and then like people are uncomfortable with it, and there becomes some sort of satisfaction in making people uncomfortable with it, right? So I would look at things, and you know, but I didn't stop looking because people told me not to look. I can't believe you're listening to that, and da, 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 da. I felt the need to look. I looked, I listened, and ultimately I decided that, you know, like it was largely I don't, whatever it is, even if there was some element of it that in some world was factually true, like, I don't want to live within that. That is like a stupid thing with all the interesting things there are to do in the world, having endless conversations about whether people of different races and cultures should live together or not, and blah, 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 blah. Like, I think there's something to be said for like people in each country should be able to decide how they want to do their country, right? Like, I think people in Uruguay should decide what the rules are in Uruguay. People in, you know, China, I don't think it's for America to decide for everybody or for, you know, whatever, right? I think people should be able to have self-determination. I'm also an anarchist, and I don't believe in borders and shit. So I don't care who goes where, but like, I'm not the one to decide for everybody else. But I came to my decision on my own. Nobody stopped me from looking. Right. And even when people made fun of me for looking or said bad things for me, I just looked. I didn't do any, right? I just looked. You know, a lot of people did. I know Robert Phoenix looked into that stuff for a long time. I know Masaki's looked into it, right? Like, there, you know, there's information there, and it explains some things about the world. But I'm glad that I looked, and I decided for myself that I didn't really, which is not my cup of tea, right? Rather than like, I didn't look because everybody, you know, called me names when I looked, or thought I was bad for looking, right? Like, because now I'm sure that like that shit's not for me, right? And there's not a chance that someone's going to trick me into thinking it's for me based on it being the trend or there being popularity about that in the alternative media. So opportunities to all that shit that happens, right? Like I looked for myself. I looked for myself. I looked by myself. I wandered around in the pool and decided I didn't like the temperature of the water. So I got out, but I'm not afraid of the pool. And I also am not afraid of what people will think because I got in the pool, right? And it was an important experience. And it was during a very isolated time in my life. I was still on drugs. I was doing a lot of research into a lot of other things, right? But one of the most disturbing things about human nature that I discovered during that time, and I've had conversations about it with it, is how satisfying it is sometimes just to hear somebody say something that pisses other people off, right? And to be like, just, I don't know what that is. But this culture of like, that we should tell everybody what's okay and what's not okay, I think has created this situation, especially among a lot of young men, where it's like, no, I'm going to say and do this, even if it's wrong, because it feels good to be able to say it and not to, or whatever it is, or to be able to think it, even if I don't really think it. For right now, I'm going to say I do and see how that pisses you off and, whatever. Like, it's weird. I don't know. I wish I knew the name for the phenomena, right? But I did have like this weird twinge of like pleasure at torturing my father by letting him know that I was looking at that material. Right? I don't know what that is. And I don't feel the desire to do that now or anything like that, but I did. Like, I liked looking at shit that people told me, like even people who are open-minded on most things, don't ever look there, right? I liked like pissing them off by letting them know that I looked, right? And I feel like when you see, it got pretty weird for a couple of years in the alternative media with the whole alt-right thing, because you had a lot of people who, I was never like into it, but I researched it. When I say I got it, looked at it, I looked at it. It doesn't mean I agreed or I thought that was true, but I waded over there just to take a look. But a lot of people got swayed by that information, and it slowed down progress in a lot of other directions because people enjoyed that phenomenon that I'm talking about. So they got stuck there for a couple of years and stopped the progress of everything else. And I think if we just wouldn't do that, if we would just say, if it occurs to you to look at something, go look at it. Doesn't hurt, never hurts anybody. Unless it's something, completely out of bounds, like, that is, something with another person that is inappropriate or whatever. Like, if something, go look, decide for yourself and move on. Right. But I think this getting caught there, like that this idea that we can't, there's some things that are off limits, gets people stuck for a very long time. Right. And I've seen that. So I'm glad that I looked at that. And now I feel like when I go looking into some other territory that is like the new hot thing in the alternative media, but the way that was for a little bit, like I can feel pretty quickly like, nah, this is just another one of those things that, people are saying don't look at, because they actually would be kind of cool with it if you got stuck here and slowed the progress of everything else, right? So
yeah. Totally.
Have you had an experience like that at all?
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
You're into a lot of spirituality stuff, right? And like, I know that like within, like the Christians are always told, no, don't look at the Buddhist shit, that's of the devil, right? That kind of thing, right? Or even, within like the non-religious segment of looking at spirituality, like there's different camps in the New Age group. And if you do one thing, then the other people don't like you and whatever, right? So have you experienced stuff like that?
Yes, totally. I want to preface this saying, I've realized through my journey how my being or my mind in particular works, that I'm always like finding like a little bit in everything and putting it together and creating my own thing. And all these explorations, like the one you were speaking about that you did in this camp, or that you were exploring, and all the things that you've been exploring, they've all definitely I could say that they've all enriched your overall perspective. They've taught you about yourself. They've taught you about, you've learned, we were speaking about discernment. I think this is still an important aspect of the conversation we're having. Through listening, you learn to discern what resonates with you, so you become more in touch with your feeling, with your intuition, with your sensing, and then something else appears and you can immediately perceive certain patterns that tell you, this is again another one of those things. I will allow myself to explore this one also if there is something calling into me. But at the same time, I know that this is not the thing, but there is something here for me to create my own map. And people sometimes don't believe in themselves enough, even in what they might do, given the freedom to do anything. They are a bit scared of themselves because of ignorance of themselves. So they're like, but maybe if I explore this racist thing, I might end up becoming a racist. I might not have the strength in myself to discern and say, well, no, I disagree with this. So, and they're like black and white. So, no, so nothing of this. I will not explore this because who knows where my mind will end up if I explore this. So, okay, let's block that. And I don't think that is necessarily the path for me. I don't know if I would recommend it for anybody else, but I mean, in a way, if you are sensing within yourself that you shouldn't explore something, then totally go with your feeling and start to learn to read your own self, your own intuitions that are coming from somewhere else that is not rational or tangible. And you also made me think about this idea of the countries doing whatever they want, or your belief of that, and at the same time being an anarchist. And I'm kind of similar like that, and I connected it with an idea that I have of us. I describe it like we have two perspectives at the same time available to us. Maybe there's more, but to simplify, this is the idea that I have. One is the player, one is the character in the game. So this first person perspective of the human, Rafa, in your case, Emily. We have this perspective, but then there is that, what we could call the right brain, or the heart, or the intuition, or the bird's eye view, or a more spiritual perspective that is kind of outside of time and can look into time and into the board from above, right? So we are learning in a certain way to connect those two perspectives, one of which, the larger one, we tend to forget it exists, because in order to experience the smaller one, we need to forget that one so that we can see through the eyes of the small one. But I think there is a way that we can interact both of those at the same time and perceive the world through both at the same time. And you said that about the countries, and it made me think also how it's important that each one, so each country or each person, but each country, for example, be allowed to have, or each community be allowed to have its own rules and its own ways of doing things and viewing things. And then at the same time, in a larger way, all of humanity, all of Earth, having a certain also way of doing things. So we need to find this way that is both and, that.
I love the idea of a both and.
That you are free to do your thing. It's hard to put into words, because we don't want to fall back into, okay, so to do your thing but also do the big thing, there's certain things that you will not be allowed to do because they are outside of the big thing, so they can't exist in the small one. But maybe finding other ways, more positive ways to express that don't end up being enforced with like limiting people of what they can do. What could be the larger thing that we can allow every individual or every small community to do, that also is included within a larger thing that respects the larger thing? I think we are in a transition in the world going that way. I don't know how long it will take us to figure out or to allow for that information to come across. And and be shared with enough people so that it starts functioning. But in previous times, what through the ideas of Atlantis, etc., beyond it being true or having happened, it's not important. But the lesson I think that comes from there is that some part of the mind was overemphasized over the other, and that led to the destruction because of that lack of balance, that forgetting the middle way, and we are in a sort of similar place. So we can use that idea to see, okay, how can we balance both aspects? These extreme intellect people are excluding the irrational or the intuitive, because it cannot be put into the intellectual box or the scientific box, perhaps, but not realizing that exclusion is unscientific. So in their own terms, they are not even following what they say should be followed, which is a scientific experiment and replication, etc. They're just out of their own opinion saying, "Oh no, this is unacceptable because it's not scientific." Have you demonstrated that it's not scientific in order to say from your paradigm that it is not scientific? I don't think it can be demonstrated, because in my own experience, and definitely in your own experience, I understand, we have had experience with this invisible, more intuitive other side of reality. So we know there is something else there. It's hard to put into words, and that is kind of the difficult thing, right?
So I think, yeah, no, absolutely. So I think the only way I know for what you're talking about, right? And this is the part that's really so challenging, is I've never met a person who is in, when I say control of themselves, I don't mean control the way we've been trained to think of control. I mean true holistic, like
harmony or whatever.
Harmony, right? I've never met a person who's in complete control of themselves who has any concerns about controlling another person, let alone a whole group of people or a country or a world of people, right? So I think the only way to have what you're talking about, where there can be like this microcosm, and then this macrocosm, and then this undefinable yet totally knowable thing that exists outside of both the macro and the micro, that sort of acts as the interface between the two of them, can exist, is if everybody understands that if they see something outside of themselves that they would like to change, right? The only way to change it is by changing yourself, right? And generally, like, if everybody, like, this is the part that's crazy, like, I'm 100% certain of this though, if everybody straightened out their own internal health and diet, if from today going forward, right, if everybody for the next year just spent the whole year with the only thing that they were concerned about was getting their body and their mind into health. It doesn't even have to be that we all have to agree about what health is. Whatever they see as their ideal of health, if they spent all their time only focused on getting themselves to that degree of state, there would be no war, there would be no environmental pollution, there would be, I'm not going to say there'd be no bickering or arguing at all, because I actually think that's an important part of the growth process, right? But all these things that we think of as problems, and all of these, and the problem is that we think, well, we must pick somebody to control that problem, to stop that problem from happening, like, all of that would be gone. There would be none of that, right? And so that's the only thing that I know in terms that would work to create what you're talking about. And that only thing I think that could get us to that space is like, if there was just such a momentous, there was some kind of event or occurrence, or whether it be like some sort of energetic pulse or some sort of like undescribable act, so something happened so weird that nobody knows what to make of it, and we're all equally confused, that like, that's like a great sort of like palate cleanser or leveling kind of experience, right? Then people would be like, okay, like, what do I do now? It seems almost impossible, right? And so, like, in the meantime, with things like, I don't, we are all people. I think so. Sonia's going to be on my show next week, and she's going to be on to talk about a workshop she's doing where she's going to talk about like the matrix of a city, a county, a country, a government. What was the game that the founding fathers were playing that led to all of these matrices within matrices, right? So you have a city is in a county is in a state is in a country, the country is part of this overall planet, right? Like it's the games within the games. But I think that like the thing that you're getting at, and the thing that I'm getting at is kind of like, all right, like people, like localities should kind of be able to decide what they want, and humans should be able to move about freely. And the only thing that I can think of is that would make that work is that if we didn't have governments that created social programs, right? Because then what happens is like, oh, well, like if I want to go to Earth, if I want to move to Uruguay, right? Then like, it would seem to make sense that I would want to move to Uruguay because I like Uruguay, right? Like I like it there. That style of those people, that style of living works for me. And so I'm going to go there and join in how they do things, right? But the way things are now, there are some countries where you go there, you get free healthcare, you get a lot of money, or whatever from the government, you get certain kinds of assistance you don't get where you live. There's better access to jobs. So these all become the motivating factors as to why people want to go from one place to another place, rather than this is the place that feels good to me. Like, I'm sure, like, you probably like it where you're from. Most of us have some degree of affinity for where we're from, but we all also have like one place we traveled to that just, we loved it. Everything felt perfect for us there. What is that place for you?
No, that's a tricky question. I mean, I wouldn't say everything was perfect anywhere that I've traveled, of course, but I remember going as a young kid to Mexico to the pyramids there. It was wow, amazing.
Okay, but we go places. Sometimes we have one city that we visit a lot and we really like it there. And we're just like, oh man, I wish my family lived here because then I'd move there or whatever. Like sometimes there's like a better place for you to go and we need to be free to do that. But we cannot expect that like everybody who's already there should like rearrange themselves because Emily is coming. As nice as that idea sounds, right now, whatever. Like that's the whole thing is that, the way somebody fits into the overall collective, like like people should be able to be like free to do. Trying to think of like, okay, so when you're watching, have you ever watched like a train moving through somewhere and there's people who like they're good at jumping on the train while the train is moving and catching it, like the hobos and stuff. Like,
I've seen it in films, not personally. Yeah.
But they can run fast enough. They can synchronize themselves with the train and then hop on and continue on in the direction. They're not trying to stop the train and getting it to turn around and go the other way. Like if you can bring yourself to that frequency or whatever it is that you can just meld right into and hop on and ride along with this thing. And I'm not saying that I think it's okay to jump trains and not pay. I don't know what I think about that. But I mean, there has to be some level of self-awareness. And that comes from controlling your own body. The person jumping on the train is not slowing the train down to get on the train. It's this person has learned to run fast enough that they can keep up with the train and then hop on, right? So it has to be like an interchange. Like, there was no, this is why like I do the nutrition stuff with people, because once people get good at making decisions about what they're going to put in their body, they make good decisions about what they're doing outside. And I think this goes for everything, but we live in such an externalized world, right? Where everything is about, well, what will the outside think about what you did on, all that kind of stuff, that nobody even stops to think about, like, the answer to some external problem being an internal change, right? That's never what it is. Like even, you know, with corporations, a lot of times they don't go, we need to change our culture inside. They go, well, if only I could hire somebody else from outside, or if only we could sue these people and put them out of business, then blah, 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 right? It's almost always like an internal issue, but I don't know if people even want to do that. You know, like, I don't know if they do. I know some people who do, right? But, I mean, we live in such a strange world that, like, if everybody just decided tomorrow that they wanted to do that, it could, like, all this nonsense could stop that quickly, right? We're in this weird time where, like, tomorrow could be anything, right? Tomorrow could be total tyranny, could be total freedom, could be total chaos, could be a beautiful day, right? Could be, who knows, right? Who knows? But I don't know what people want to do. What does it feel like in Uruguay? Does it feel like people like this, whatever the fuck this is we live in now, or that they would like something else?
Of course, you have different people for different opinions, and I'm thinking also, I will get to the question, but you make me think of, for example, so focusing on your body and getting your physical health a bit more in order than it might be today, of course, would be a great change and a great place to start creating that change in the outside. But then again, I also think how we could speak of the body as having different energy centers that talk or that point at different areas of life or aspects of life. So maybe if the aspect that is connected to physical health is a little bit challenging for you to focus in because of whatever reason, maybe you can start going up in those chakras, those centers, and seeing, well, okay, am I communicating my whatever I feel, what I think? Am I expressing myself enough, and am I happy with the way I'm communicating myself? Is there something that I can change there? Am I connecting with other people in a way that feels satisfying? Am I giving enough? Am I giving enough to others and to myself? Am I being loving enough to myself, or am I always criticizing myself and always judging and saying that everything that I do sucks and that everything that's bad is always happening to me? Maybe taking small steps in different areas of life can eventually lead us to a certain energetic opening into the self, and seeing, okay, here I did these small steps and found a doorway into this part where I can create an even larger change. So maybe taking those small steps. And here in Uruguay, I see people not happy with what's happening. I mean, internationally, but at the same time, I also see lots of compliance and, okay, so some people took, and at the same time, I'm kind of a person that I don't really pay much attention to that, because I understand, okay, everyone is creating their own reality, so go ahead. But I find it funny, you know, people taking 2 doses, and suddenly it turned out that there was this brand that, I don't know, wasn't as good or whatever, so people are taking a 3rd dose, but it's of another brand, so they're starting to mix stuff. And then the other day, talking to a friend, it was like, so he came from Spain to visit, and he said, yeah, no, I had it over there. The only symptom that I had was a loss of smell. And then, so I had it, I fought it, and I was, my body healed. Then to come here, I guess they asked him, or he felt like he was safer, or not safer, but he wasn't going to have any trouble going to the airport, etc. if he took the vaccine. So he took it, and then when he got here, he had to get the PCR test. So it's like nothing seems to work against this thing, because you had it and you were cured, but you need the vaccine, but you need to have a test. So what the hell? And I think I saw today, I would have to research it better, but apparently it's even more more of a prevalence of cases in people who have taken it than in people who haven't taken the shot. So it's so crazy how people have lost every connection with reality and with the physical reality in that sense, which talks about what you're saying about the body, but I think it also talks about the mind of people. Like, where are people even here? Are they here, or are they just in so distracted by the media and by what the authorities are saying that they aren't even looking for a moment, okay, how does this decision feel for me? What should I do in my opinion, right? They're so, and it's kind of sad also that and that people are so lost.
It's kind of, so first of all, your point about communication or your thoughts or how you're interacting, that was another iteration of what I was talking about, but that's still changing yourself. You didn't say, I'm upset with how people are communicating with me. It was, how can I change, right? How can I change? Like, instead of how do I change out there, or how can that change? Just like, how can I change? So it could be your physical health. Some people have naturally very physical, healthy bodies, but their mind is monkey mind. Their thoughts, they think, they're not clean with how they're thinking. And I say clean, they're not mindful of what they're thinking about. They're not mindful of the words they're using when they talk with people. They're not mindful of, the language they use to talk to themselves, like you said. But everything you said is still like, how can I change myself? Not how can I change everything else, right? So, but I like that. But then what you're talking about, it's kind of like the way people are making decisions about what they're going to do with this in this scenario. It's kind of like, it's like they've lost all sense of reality, like you said, with how they're going to deal with themselves in this situation. It's like they're trying to decide what item to pick off the menu in a restaurant, right? And like, there's, so-and-so says, oh, the steak is the best. And so-and-so says the chicken is the best. And the server said, oh no, I really like the fish. And the person over there is a vegetarian, is like, oh my God, the tofu is so good, right? And you're just listening to all this stuff, and it becomes confusing, even though like you had an idea in your head right away which one you wanted, but so-and-so is like, oh my God, you have to try the chicken here. But I mean, I'm being kind of silly, but that's what this is like because of what you're talking about, right? So it's like, I mean, how many times have you ever, like, I've had this at a restaurant, right? Where like, I know I want this thing, but somebody talks me into trying something else. And in the end, I send it back and get the thing I wanted anyway. And so, he felt he had it, he felt good, he didn't think he needed anything, but the waitress told him he needed to have this because that's the best thing on the menu. And then when he, ate that and then went to the doctor afterwards, they're like, no, the thing you ate was bad, so now I have to test you to see, right, when they had the right thing. And that's what we're down to. It's like,
and maybe even through the idea of, okay, I will have that, because if I have that, those people won't bother me that I had something else, so I'll just take that.
Yeah, like if you're having dinner with a bunch of Jewish people and they might judge you if you eat the pork, you're like, Jesus, I want the bacon, but I'm just gonna have the chicken or whatever, so that they don't say anything. And then you like it, and then you go home and eat the bacon anyway. So it's like, right? Totally, dude. So yeah, I think it's but this goes to what you said, and I like the way you said it about, like, we have the smaller thing and then this bigger reality, and then outside of that, and like you have to make sense to yourself first on the inside, and then you can try and align that with what's happening in the outer world and go, wait a second, okay, this is what people out there say that makes sense. But if doing the thing that they say makes sense doesn't make sense in here, that can't possibly make sense, right? And you only know what makes sense on the inside once you've gotten to know yourself, gotten yourself healthy, whether that's your diet, your physical, or your mental, or whatever it is. But just because somebody out there says something makes sense out there, if it doesn't make sense in here, it doesn't make sense. And everybody is more worried about whether it makes sense out there, and not really. It's just backwards. Like, everyone.
And also, it makes sense for me, so now I'm going to push it on everybody else. No, I mean, if whatever everybody else is doing doesn't make sense for you, then it's just an opportunity and a cue that's telling you, okay, I'm going to see what makes sense for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter until I sometimes say, like, if the world is like a screen full of pixels and your pixel is broken, you will never get a clear image if you're always focusing on the other pixels and what they have to show. Or if you want, okay, go and fix every pixel, but at the end there will still be your own thing to fix or to harmonize. So maybe start there, and now that you are harmonized, you will go and do something over there that is more harmonic even than what you could have done before fixing your own thing.
Yep, totally. I agree. All right, shall we? I have got another appointment in just a little bit, so
you're very busy, yeah?
I'm very busy.
You're taking time to rest, yes?
Yes. That's part of how I end up so tight every day, is because every day I'm like, I'm going to wake up early today and start early. And then in the morning, I'm like, I'm tired. I'm going back to bed for another hour and a half or whatever. So that's how the rest of the day becomes compressed. So yes.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I'm going to go to the, it's not the ocean, it's actually the river, but it's so big that it feels like the ocean. On the weekend, I'm going to go there, and I'm going to, if the weather allows, I'm going to just jump into the water and float there for a while. I feel like I need it.
Is the river so big that you can't see the other side?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's the widest river in the world.
You can see everything. So
here, this is the widest river in the world, or one of the widest.
Which river is this?
It's the Rio de la Plata, River Plate. Maybe you can find it like that.
Rio de la Plata.
Plata. Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah, I spoke about it in my recent podcast with. Yeah.
I see how wide it is. Okay, so where is this one? Hold on a second.
In my last podcast, I spoke with Michael Wan.
Yeah.
That can be found on the YouTube. I spoke a little about the river. We had a kind of glass bead game, and I had these certain points that I started connecting of the map here that he pointed something out the previous time, and I started connecting a bunch of points and the history of the city, and it was a pretty cool experience. And yeah, we talked about the river, and I remember this thing, and we've always been taught that the Rio de la Plata is one of the widest rivers in the world. Yeah,
it looks pretty amazing. Yeah, the river here, I can see it all the way, everything across it. I watched this cool little so one of our listeners sent me this video about the ice surfers of Lake Superior. So I think it was like on Vice or something. And just when you were talking about the river was so wide, it was like an ocean. It made me think of this. The lake has waves like an ocean, and they call it the ice beards. They're called the ice beards because they all have long beards, and they go out there and surf in the winter on Lake Superior, which has waves that are big enough to surf, and their beards freeze, right? So their beards look like icicles hanging and whatnot. But when you were talking about the river as wide as the ocean, it made me think of the lake with the waves like the ocean. I couldn't believe it. They're just out there surfing like it's the ocean, but it's the lake. It's crazy. Yeah, in the case of this river, it's because of the shape of the land, it kind of gets very thick suddenly, and you kind of don't really know where the ocean starts and where the river ends. So so it's very wide. Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Well, enjoy yourself. Have a good time. Sure. Thank you, Emily. Look forward to talking to you. I look forward to doing it again. Cool. And yeah, me too. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Emily. What else to say? Well, I'm really happy for all of this experience of doing the podcast and learning so much and connecting with people like you and with people like whoever's listening right now. That I'm very thankful for your support and for opening your hearts and your minds for stuff like this. And we will see you very soon on our next conversation. Bye-bye. Thank you.